incredibly, you are the first new chief editor of the Oxford English Dictionary in 20 years.
That's true.
You've been there, though, way longer. Before, all of our businesses started with computers. Are you surprised that this tome of written words has survived?
Well, I think that my predecessor, John Simpson, and his colleague Edmund Weiner were very quick to pick up on the potential of the OD in an electronic context. And so they converted the OD into digital form in the late 1980s. And by the time we published the second edition then, it was already available on CD-ROM. It was one of the first reference works available on CD-ROM. And then it was also one of the first reference works online in 2000. So we saw an opportunity to publish in a different way, and I think we grabbed it with both hands.
So you have more than kept up with the times.
I hope so, and I think we have to think now about how we can change the dictionary so that it brings it to a new audience who often, I think, expect their content to be in situ, when they need it, where they need it, rather than having to go to a separate reference work.
So what is your mission? How will you do that?
I think the challenge is to continue to satisfy the current readership, which is quite broad, and also to bring in a new generation of users who perhaps expect it to be more dynamic content that merges with their own needs day to day, I think.
A lot of people will say, hang on a second, and maybe I'm reflecting the sort of traditional generation. The people like to see this great, big, weighty book that they know they can flip through and find the words and peruse them. Do you sometimes feel you're being forced into this brave new world, or is it absolutely vital?
Well, one of the interesting things about the OED is every form in which it's been published until now is still surviving. It's still in print, it's still in CD-ROM form, which surprises a lot of people, and it's online. The advantage of going online is that we can update it much faster. It was quite slow to compile print volumes. They're very complex. They often involve complex typography and
How long do they take, by the way? I heard it takes, decades.
One
edition.
We think that we'll finish this current new edition, which is a revision of the whole 20-volume dictionary, within the next 20 years. So it's a long-term project. The original dictionary took 50 years.
50
more.
years.
It was conceived, actually, from conception to publication, it was about 70.
And how many words for 50 years?
Well, there were about 400,000. We're now up to about 800,000, which is a lot. If you consider that the average person's vocabulary is roughly between 25,000 and 40,000, you can see why they need a dictionary, because even people who are doing 40,000 at the highest end, it's about 5% of what we've got in the OED, and that's not all the words in the language.
Okay, so this started ages and ages ago, and we're going to use our modern mappy here to bring up some of the words for love, for instance.
Yeah.
Now, love, apparently, if I touch this, will show a huge history of different spellings throughout the ages.
These are all the early spellings. Spelling in English fixed around the 18th century, so in terms of the English language, it's relatively recent. All these spellings date from before then, and most of them didn't survive later than that. But if you want to know the way Shakespeare spelled love, for example, you need to know about these.
Do you know which one it was?
More than one.
More than one.
That's the thing, because there wasn't fixed spelling. And one of the things that this is a good example of what we might do in terms of realising the potential of the OD as data, if you like, rather than just in the dictionary, is if you're using a search engine, it's very literal-minded. So, in theory, you need to know all those spellings to retrieve all the examples in Shakespeare. So put them into a search engine and have them working behind the scenes, as it were, to allow you to just put in the current spelling and retrieve all the relevant examples from that period.
Can you pronounce those different spellings?
I wouldn't even try to, no.
And then there are new words, as we've been saying. We had this year the selfie that was heard around the world. Obviously, President Obama with the Prime Minister of Denmark and indeed the Prime Minister of Great Britain. This, everybody's made a huge big deal about it. The fact that it is in the Oxford English Dictionary. Should it really be there?
Well, it's not actually in the Oxford English Dictionary. It's in our current dictionary, which is called the Oxford Dictionary, so it's slightly confusing.
Well, tell us. What does that mean?
Online, we have Oxford Dictionaries online. Well, that's a current dictionary, so it's really for practical look up of contemporary words. They tend to have short definitions. OD is about giving you the whole history. We looked at some of those variant spellings, the early spellings, telling you about the biography of a word, if you like. So you see the whole life story, and a lot of our most common words go back centuries and centuries, right back to Old English.
So let's go to New English. Selfie is a New English word. What are the others that you have? I know there's defriend, for instance.
Defriend's in the OED.
Because I used to think it was unfriend, by the way.
Well, both, in fact. And what's interesting about unfriend is, this is often the case when we research words, We found an example of unfriend from 1594.
1594.
A slightly different sense. It was somebody saying, I hope this event hasn't unfriended us, meaning,
Lost us a lot of
yes,
friends.
exactly. Well, they would have lost the friendship between them. It was about, I hope it hasn't, estranged us. Whereas all the later uses about, unfriending somebody deliberately as an act. Defriend means the same. When we put that cluster of words in, but unfriend as a noun goes back even further. So an unfriend is an enemy, going right back to Old English.
Well, let me bring you some New English back to Old English. Some of these things that some people can't stand, other people use, just OMG, for instance. Where did that first turn up?
Well, first turned up, and this will surprise most people, in a letter that an admiral wrote to Winston Churchill in 1917. So it's not quite the youth speak that is decried, is it?
It is amazing to think that. And everybody is always using, including me, I'm sure, the word literally when they don't really mean literally.
Yeah, and Mark Twain's recorded as using that, and he was no slouch really either. So
why do you think we do that? Why do we fall into that trap with literally?
Well, with literally, I think it's interesting.